Okay, so yeah, I'm going to be talking about building tools for everyone. One little thing before, oh, come on, there we go. Before we start is I kind of haven't practiced this as much as I should have, so I'm really sorry about that. And I might make some of those annoying ums and ahs. And there is some code in here, but there's nothing really in detail. I'm going to go over a few things, mostly just to kind of give context. It's more of a story than actually anything actionable. And I might maybe get you excited for like a programming language or something, perhaps. So yeah. So as was said, I'm Chris, work at Shopify. I'm on the buy button right now, doing mostly backend development, and when I can, sort of doing front-end development, but I do it really badly. And that has been focusing on making our application work for Black Friday so that whenever we get like 600,000 requests, the app doesn't die even if the database is on fire. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking about this tool called ThemeKit. And yeah, I like to make beer. I will find any reason to turn a conversation into talking about making beer or something beer related. I'm really sorry. So that's my title, like for real. Because whatever, I like cats. So yeah, I work at Shopify. We're hiring, and if you're interested, if you want to know anything about us, feel free to come talk to me after. It's a cool place to work. We're not dicks, and we take growth really importantly. If you apply, say Rich Gilbank sent you, and we're hiring for everything, front end, back end. If you want to move to Toronto, or to Ottawa, there's a lot of stuff there related to operations and stuff. So yeah, tools. What kind of tools are we going to talk about? Storefront. There's a good chance you've interacted with a Shopify storefront before. The best way to tell is look at the URL, and if it's like collections something and then products, it's probably Shopify. A good way you can always just check the content, or you can just go to /meta.json. If that resolves, it's a Shopify store. I only know about that. Like, I built that. So whenever I see a shop and I think it's Shopify, I just always do that. And I'm like, yay. Anyway, one big thing is storefront. Every merchant merchants want to control that. They don't want something where like it's Amazon or eBay where they have no control over that storefront. And they need to be able to edit that as much as possible. Now, they could use something like WordPress, or they could build their own thing. That comes with its own problems. You have to deal with hosting. You have to deal with upgrading, all that other kind of stuff. And then you have to know actually how to program, because a lot of those languages are fully, they're Turing-complete languages. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to provide a way that allows users to have a lot of flexibility. It's not complete flexibility. They can't do everything. So if you're, like, I'm a huge fan of being able to have full control. So the language that Shopify's themes are built on drives me crazy. But for a lot of people, it does what they need, and it gives them a lot of functionality. But we also need to be careful, because we don't want that code that's running to possibly compromise our system. So it also has to be sandboxed. So this is, our templating language is Liquid, which was built by Toby, our CEO, back around 2006, 2007. Lets them control how their site looks. And the code, like I said, is fairly sandboxed. But it's nothing like too crazy. They can do quite a bit of stuff, and then sometimes they have to do really weird things to get some features going. And that's the kind of part that makes Liquid a little bit painful if you like to be in control of everything. And that's some of the problems we've had with it. And whenever you upload your Liquid, Shopify does some fancy stuff, and then it'll cache it and do all that fancy stuff so that we can keep our servers running and serve up like too many thousand requests a minute. So this is what Liquid looks like. It's it's like a markup language. If you've ever used Jekyll, or I think Middleman uses it a lot, and Customer.io uses Liquid. Like, Liquid's pretty big. It's old. It's like 10 years old, and you can tell when you use it that it's an old like markup language compared to a lot of other ones that are a bit more flexible. But it does what you need. You just have to remember that, like, it's almost like writing bash scripts, because you do like for and in bash, you do if, fi, stuff like that. And yeah, so all this does is it would go for all of my products in my collection that I'm at on my page. I'd render them all in a list with their title and linking off to that product page. So let's just talk about how themes were working in the beginning. But like right when Shopify started, there really wasn't an API to work with anything, and we needed to get something out there so that people could start building themes for our platform, so that when we launched, there'd actually be themes on Shopify, and people had experience with it. So they built this thing. I can't remember what it was called. It had like a cool name. It was like, where's Dunkley when I need him? Anyway, what it did is it lets you simulate a Shopify store locally. Now this is super awesome because you don't have to be connected to the internet at all. But the problem is Shopify's Liquid API was evolving at the same time, so there'd be discrepancies in the Liquid that was running on their systems and then the Liquid that we were actually serving up. So what would happen is the merchant or the designer, they do all their stuff and they're like, yeah, this looks awesome, and then they go upload it via, like they just like upload a zip of the theme to Shopify, and then they run, they're like, everything's broken. This is the worst. I hate the world. And like we couldn't like do that. We had to come up with something that was a bit better. So we kind of wanted to look at how we could improve this. A few years later, we had we released our public API. So that included everything from being able to modify products to being able to modify themes, which is the thing we're focusing on, and people built a lot of really cool stuff. We had one that was a TextMate plugin that people could use to modify their pages, their themes, and it would upload it automatically. And then we also had this application called the Desktop Theme Editor. So the advantage is people no longer had to worry about the discrepancies or bugs causing grief, but unfortunately it meant that they had to be connected. So yeah, the theme editor, this was like the first tool we had. It gave people a really straightforward way to work with their themes, and it made some things related to theme development a bit easier that could have been harder if you weren't using this tool or the, what's it called? The TextMate plugin. But one problem that people had with this is whenever you'd pull down a theme, it did this really weird file structure. So if you're actually trying to do a versioned system like a programmer does with like Git, it was a nightmare. And we had to come up with a solution that kind of helped with that. Another problem is this tool was only built for Mac OS, and people that were on other platforms like Linux or Windows, there's a lot of people who use Windows, believe it or not, and they'd be like, hey, I want to modify themes. And we're like, go buy a Mac. Whatever, no big deal. It's only $2,000. So you can only do that for so long, and we've gotten pretty big, and people will tell you to go. This is what I was telling you about. So one of our developers went and built a command line tool in Ruby, and what was great about this is it allowed us to take advantage of the Ruby VM runs on every platform. There were a few dependencies that had to be pulled in, so on a Windows platform, you'd have to go and download the Ruby installer and maybe some other stuff. But what was great is this was like the first step in building a program that would work for everybody. This is more focused for command line oriented users. It provides a bunch of functionality, uploading, downloading, replacing, viewing, using a bunch of like little like mix-ins. You just say like open, like theme open, and boom, it like opens up your web browser, takes you to your website. And also if you're uploading a specific version, if you're working on a specific theme, it would open it in the preview for that one, so you could see what your theme would look like without modifying your production one. But the big feature was the watch. What this did is it runs some background, like long-running process that pulls your file system, and whenever files change, it uploads them to Shopify. So you get almost near real-time preview, like real-time feedback on the theme changes you're making. It served us well. It's done its job. Unfortunately, it wasn't built in the most maintainable way, so adding more features is becoming more difficult. And also with a lot of the pipelines that people have been building, I've seen a lot of people using Gulp or Bower or whatever the tools of the day are. They have these like pipelines because they like building a theme now or building a website now is completely different from the way it was back in 2006 and 2007. People have all of these things they need to bring in, Compass or Bourbon or whatever, Bootstrap or something, and you have to run it through this compilation pipeline, and then you upload that. And Shopify doesn't support that. It supports like just uploading files. I have my application CSS. I have my like stylesheet.css or whatever, or application.js. So I upload all this stuff, and the problem is with this, these pipelines, they do a lot of writes. And we needed to make our stuff work a bit better such that users, like uploads would happen in parallel because generally none of these files are related, so we need to get that up going as fast as possible. Another thing that came up was there were lots of problems on Windows. And I'm just putting a focus on like a comment I added about a year ago. I have to do the debugging on my gaming PC because we don't have Windows machines at the office. So I'd be like, all right, cool, work is over. Time to go home and make sure that Ruby's working. And then I'm going to go deal with this bike shed of getting like the theme gem working and figuring out what's wrong. Why isn't SSL working? I don't know. And then I'd give up and play Fallout or something. But the big thing here is like Windows users, they're also people. Like they are actually people, and we need to care about them. They have a problem, which is I want to build a theme on Shopify. I don't want to build it in your like. No, it's not a bubble. It kind of is, but it's like our theme editor online. They don't want to use that. That thing is like okay, but only for small edits. If you're doing actual theme development, you're going to blow your brains out. So we needed to solve an SSL issue, which I think I might have solved, sort of, not really. And I wanted to ensure that people have a consistent setup. People installing the Ruby stuff always had issues, and we wanted to make that go away because I don't want to deal with those issues all the time. It was always the same thing coming up. So we went and we did some experiments. So we have this thing called Hack Days where we just get to like focus on building something, and for 3 or 4 of them, I focused on building tools to make doing theme development way easier on Shopify. So we just had 2 days. Well, actually, hold on. What's Hack Days? So this is a thing that happens every quarter at Shopify. We get 2 days to work on something, whatever we want, and by the end, we have to ship it. And it's usually just a prototype, but you'd get it done. You'd be like, hey, I have this cool thing that works. And it, like, I don't know, tracks beer consumption or something. Usually it's related to the business. Sometimes people do joke projects or just projects for fun. Like, I think someone built a Jeopardy for like Shopify history. But usually I've focused on building something that would help with a pain point, themes being that pain point. So the big question is why do themes currently suck? Windows users have a bad experience. We want to deploy, and the difficulty to deploy to all of our users is also a problem. Command line util is working great, but there's onboarding issues because some people come in and they're like, they know a little bit, but they don't know enough. And they're like, okay, so I installed this thing, and I'm getting this like stack trace, and I'm like, that's cool, let me help, I guess. And our Mac application was like super out of date, no one was working on it, and it was only a Mac application. So we kind of asked ourselves, what can we do to make this experience better? So I talked with Toby and like one of our designers, and he like threw a bunch of things out, and I kind of thought about some stuff too, and we're like, all right, let's take a look at all of these things and see what we can maybe do in the future as like just stuff to try. And what are the dependencies? What dependencies do we want to have as little of? So threw a bunch of ideas around. One that came up was Fuse, which is the file system in user space. What we could do is we could use the Shopify API to implement a file system that would just be on the user's computer, and they just interact with it. And that's cool. But unfortunately, it doesn't, it's not really maintained for, Fuse for Mac OS X isn't maintained anymore, and there's also no Windows support, or I couldn't find any. So that was kind of off. A native application, so we had one, Mac only. So we want a native application that only works on, or that works on every platform. If Preferably, it shouldn't have a runtime. People shouldn't have to install Ruby or Java or anything like that to get it running. If it does have a runtime, the runtime should be bundled into the application, so all they have to do is just launch it. And ideally, this would also include a UI. And there is the concern of building cross-platform tools. Is the build systems kind of suck. Like building a cross-platform thing in Go and C is a bit of a pain, and you have to have you have to be able to do the builds for it, and it's sometimes kind of rough. Dropbox was one that I was like super into. I was looking at it, I'm like, wait, people already use Dropbox. Dropbox is super awesome, and it does all the synchronization. We don't have to build a client because the client is Dropbox. All we have to do is get updates. When we first looked at it, Dropbox, their API didn't support push. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to pull. So every time we had a user use the application, we'd have to like have another polling connection to Dropbox to find out what was changing. And Shopify has like 100,000 merchants or something. So multiply that by like 2 designers each, and like that application would be crying all the time. So thankfully, about a year later, Dropbox announced their webhooks and cursors API. So whenever a file changes, Dropbox sends you a webhook saying, hey, stuff's changed. And all you're doing is you're holding onto a cursor, and you're like, hey, Dropbox, something has changed. Tell me what's changed from this cursor to like the future. And then it gives you back all the files that have changed. And then you could resolve that and upload that to wherever, or do whatever you need to it, read the data. And the best part of this is it let us use building a tool that used Dropbox would let us use something that we're a lot of engineers at Shopify are very comfortable with, Ruby on Rails, and whatever. So we could build it in Rails. It'd be an app that runs like on Heroku or a machine somewhere, and we don't have to worry about users like what platform they're running on. So we did that. One of our hack days was building this theme called Themebox. So themes with Dropbox. We could manage all the updates ourselves, and the users would get those changes for free. And we were able to use, so what was really cool is there was like, we built this like really janky web notifications API thing. So whenever a file would change, like a little thing would pop up being like, oh, this file's been updated. So we were able to tell users that their files had changed. But while we were using, this is another benefit, is like I was saying before, the user it just goes to a file system, like somewhere on their file system, and it looks like this. So another added benefit, which one of our like developer advocate guys liked, was the old why can't I word today? TextMate plugin allowed you to also modify pages. So something that we kind of added in for funsies was the ability to also modify pages on your file system, and instead of having to go up to Shopify and then like modify them in like the editor there. And then we also had the theme or the themes on the shop as directories. So your theme had a name, we'd create a directory, put all the files in there, and it was just working with a file system. One of the problems is updates weren't super fast. So when I'd like make an edit, it could take up to 5 seconds before the webhook would get to the server would handle it, and then it would push it up to Shopify. So if you're doing lots of active theme development, you'd go crazy because you'd make your update, you're waiting, and you don't know if something's wrong, you don't really know. It was still prototype. We probably could have gone somewhere with it, but like you still don't know what the issues are. So you like upload, you're like, cool, my file's up there. Why isn't it showing up on Shopify? And did something go wrong? Is it slow? Is the server on fire? I don't know. So we kind of looked at this. We're like, well, that was a bit of a failure. But we kind of used that to kind of reinforce something. So we needed the tool to run on the user's platform. Scaling this out to all of our merchants is not going to be realistic. It's if things go wrong, it's going to be really hard to notify the user. There's going to be a lot of communication between Dropbox and the app and Shopify, and then the app also talking to all the users. So we'd have to have like all these connections open just to like tell a user that a file's gone wrong. Here's what the problem is. Uploading the file. So we're like, all right, native application is the way to go. So what are we going to do here to make sure that it'll work? So Shopify, it scales. Like, we don't have to worry about that. Unless Shopify's down, then you're whatever. You can't do anything. But that never happens, ever. I'm lying. So the two things that are a concern are updates and installation. The nice thing with Dropbox is installation was you'd go to a web page, you'd say install this app, and then you'd like authorize it for Shopify, and boom, your app's installed. Super easy. Client applications, it's a bit of a different story. Installing it is either they download something from somewhere, maybe we put it on Homebrew, or maybe it's on the App Store, maybe it's like a signed binary, whatever. Installation is probably the easier part. Keeping clients up to date is a much harder problem. And verifying that users are updating is the other issue. And the thing we want with that is we want to make sure that updates are transparent. The user gets the updates, but they don't really have to like do anything about it. So we made a decision to go with the Go programming language to build this. It lets us build binaries for all platforms. Those binaries have no dependencies. The runtime is included in the binary itself. Everything is statically compiled, so you just give them this thing, and it just runs. They don't have to have any DLLs on their OS to get it working. And another advantage, which was a big problem we had in the Ruby gem, was the SSL. SSL support, Go comes with its own SSL like libraries, which also handle all the signature stuff. So we don't have to worry about a user having the right SSL certificates on their OS somewhere. It's all there. Now the other big thing is the structure. So the Ruby gem was designed pretty badly. It was like 2 files, and one was using Thor, and the other one was like just like a bunch of like static like class methods. So it was pretty gnarly to work with. So we wanted to avoid running into this problem again because this was basically a rewrite just in a different language. And one thing that I wanted, because I had a conversation with Louis Laverna, I think. And something I wanted to do with the Ruby gem was I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like have it like do some weird like post-install stuff. And he's like, don't do that. Like, people might use this as a library. And if you're installing your gem does some weird stuff where it's like downloading extra things or whatever, and people just want to use your library to talk to whatever it is, you're kind of being a jerk. So I kind of took that and applied this here. I was like, I want to build a library, and then around that library, we want to have an application. So we started with a command line tool because it's easier. A command line application that wraps that library. And the advantage of this is it made the core application. So this is the whole like Gary Bernhardt functional core imperative shell, except it's not a functional core right now at all, but we're getting there. But we wanted to have this core that was really easy to test. And then we would break it down into, like, there's 3 components that it consists of. So there's the theme kit package. This is where basically all the code lives. If you've ever opened up a Go or like gone to a Go repository, it's usually just one big list of files. So mostly everything lives in that. The code there is pretty dumb. It just, you say, hey, upload this file, like upload this thing to Shopify with this configuration, and it goes and it makes a request. So it's just responsible for putting and pulling data from the API. And it also manages our configuration, which was based on the old one from the theme gem, because I wanted to try to move people who are on the theme gem over to this one. It mostly works. There's some issues there, but and that's just based on like a configuration struct in Go. So this is what it looks like. This is the command line utility. So this was the first run at it. There was an article written by Ben B. Johnson about building your binaries for Go. So you basically just have this command package, and in there, all of your apps, like all of your command apps will live. So for us, we had the theme watch, theme configure, theme upload. And the advantage of this is we're able to focus on one little thing at a time. And if you were to look at this, like let's say you were building like a web server, like Apache, you would get something, like it'd be like the Apache server and then the one, or whatever, something that like does all that management stuff for you. There's a lot of duplication going on here. At the start, I was like, whatever, I'm going to live with this because I haven't figured out what I want yet. And the kind of thing that we came up, that we sort of converged onto is we're going to have these function interfaces that just define, this is what a command looks like, and then it takes in a bunch of options. So we moved over to a single command. This was in the theme, the theme library, that's what we had. So what this gives us is this allows us to have a single binary. The other problem with the multiple binary approach is the same code is getting dumped into each one, and a Go binary, at least for this, was about 8 megs. So if you have the same data duplicated across a bunch of binaries, like every command we added an extra 8 megs for nothing. So we wanted to move that all in because there was barely any code being added. And also it gave us the nice thing of people don't have to remember all the names of our commands. They just say theme-h, and all the commands print out saying, these are all the commands you can do. So theme watch is one, so this would boot up your watcher, and then it goes and watches for file changes, then uploads them to Shopify. The nice thing about this as well is it's fairly modular, so adding new commands is pretty straightforward. And most of the commands all fall into the same pattern. So we have like file manipulation commands. Those are upload, replace, delete, and stuff like that. So all of those are basically the same, so we were able to leverage the same parsers for it. They just have a different name in front of them, and they run a different program whenever it's run. So this is the command. So this is the ThemeKit commands package. So we have the command, like the actual binary, which is like, I think it's just command theme, and then it's there. But then we also have the commands package, which is just, it's all of the UI stuff, or the command line stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to use it if we build a web app, or a web app / Electron application or something. These allow us to put all the information related to that and make sure the processes happen in the same order. And yeah, like I said, these are all being used for the command line. And I did prototype some stuff with like Electron or that other one, whatever, to do an application. So it would boot up a web server, and then I'd provide a bunch of API endpoints and like send it stuff. And I had something working, and then when I went to demo it, command paste wasn't working. So I couldn't enter my API key, and I was sad. So the big thing is keeping those APIs extensible. The big thing that's going on here is this is a terrible example. Okay, this is just, so what we want to do is we wanted to keep it extensible. A big thing that you want to avoid is passing in like, every time you add a new option, you add a new argument, and then your APIs break. So what we want is we want our APIs to be reverse compatible. And one way of doing that is using an options structure. And so right now I just have this thing that's like getStuffOps that I pass into a getStuff function. So in here we would pass in a string and a port. Now let's say I wanted to add something else that was like ignore SSL. In here I'd have to say SSL false or something. And the problem with that is now anyone who updates my library now has to deal with all of this like stuff being broken. So if we were to put use SSL Boolean here, the advantage it gives us is people using an older version of the library can update, and they don't have to worry about all their function calls getting broken. And this isn't really new. If you write Ruby or Python or Java, like in Ruby and Python, there's like keyword arguments, and in JavaScript you just pass in a JSON object and you just like ask for things on it. But because Go is statically typed, we have to do something like this. And yeah, so I had to edit this. He's saying something else. Not all commands take the same kind of options, so this left us in a bit of a problem. So we want to make sure that interface is flexible enough to add new functionality, and as well as like letting people know what is going on. So we do the whole empty interface thing. This is, you see it a lot. It's basically an empty interface can be anything, and you are responsible for doing the typecasting, and it can be a little bit error prone. So here's an example of something that's going on. So so this is the empty interface thing. So I have a map of strings to interfaces, and those interfaces can be anything. They're just some kind of Go struct or whatever. And then I have to go and then coerce that, whatever that key is, out of those arguments, and then turn it into the thing I want. So basically, this remove command, this is the thing that my command line program is calling. So it says remove command with all of these arguments that I parsed from the command line, and then it calls the remove function after coercing everything into the remove options. So I say extract theme client from the arguments and set it to this like pointer. Do the same thing for the event log, and then do set the file names to the extraction of the string slice of that key from the arguments. So this lives in the dumpster of common.go. So this is just a bunch of things that are responsible for coercing stuff into data types that I need. So I take in a string and I take in an args map, and then I return a string. I return a slice of strings. You have to do some like boilerplate, make sure that I can coerce it out correctly. If I couldn't coerce it, like get angry, otherwise return the array of string or the slice of strings. The big thing here is like there's so much more going on than just the code that's being written. What we want, the big thing is we want to make sure that it's easy for the user. When I first started this project, installing ThemeKit was go to GitHub, find the zip for your platform, download it and put it somewhere and make sure that command is on your path. Everything was documented, but people are like, I have no clue what's going on here, and this is stupid, and like, could we make this easier? Because I try to do it and it's not working, and I can't find the theme command, or it's using the old Ruby theme command. What's going on? This is the worst. So automated installation had to happen. Linux and Mac, it's a joke. Well, it's a sketchy joke. It's kind of greasy the way it works, but basically, it's if you've ever installed Homebrew or other random things from the internet, it's like curl this thing and pipe it into shell. Nothing's going to go wrong, I swear. So I was like, I don't want to do this, but I want to get it going really quickly, so let's do it. What do users have installed on their platforms? I'm pretty sure Linux always comes with Python, and Mac has Python, so we're going to do it in Python. So built a Python script that you just curl and pipe into your Python like interpreter, and then it goes and downloads some stuff and runs arbitrary code on your computer. I promise that I'm not doing anything bad. It's all online. At least I don't think I'm doing anything bad, and if I did it, I'm sorry. It wasn't malicious. The nice thing about this is all it does is it installs everything and says, add this to your path. With that, a lot of support issues, like tickets on the package have gone down by a lot related to installation. Fortunately, installation on Windows is not there. I've looked into it, but it's using like Windows installer, and I have no clue how Windows installer works at all. And I also saw there's like the nullsoft installation script stuff, and I was like, that's promising, but I still don't know how to use it. And apparently there's some issues with like really long path names, and it'll like chop them up. So if anyone here knows Windows installer or wants to learn it, you should submit a pull request or just talk to me, and then maybe we can like work on something. Because it'd be great. Like I want to make Windows users like happy and get all that going for them. And then the other big thing is automating releases. So as I said, every time a new release came out, it's like, hey, make sure you're paying attention to like my Twitter or something, because I'll be like, hey, new release is out, go download it. And then people do it, and then they have to remember where they put it and like what they did, and hopefully everything's working. But there's if anyone's used ngrok, that author has built this thing. He's built this application, this web app called equinox.io, and that lets you have a build, like a release system for your Go programs. And it's got a bunch of features. It's got like an alpha, like the stable channel, betas, nightly builds, and then people can opt into what they want. Fortunately, it's still in closed beta, so I couldn't get access to it. And what we did instead is we took a really naive approach to doing something similar where we just generate manifest files and put them up on S3 and then tell them where to go to get the assets. So an update looks like this. So you go to where they're hosted to latest.json, and it includes the version, and then an array of releases, and then you go through that looking for the one for your platform. So it's like Linux, AMD, Linux i386, Darwin AMD 64, Windows something something, and then it includes a hex digest and then the URL for that actual zip file. No, it's just a binary, it's not a zip file. So upgrading became a lot easier. We built something in so that whenever the application runs, it goes in the background and does a check. So for really short-running like really short-running commands, the user generally won't get the prompt being like, yo, there's an update, you should update. But a lot of people are using watch, and watch is a pretty long-running command. So when it's running, a little like banner will pop up saying, hey, version 0.3.8 is out. You should install it by typing like theme update, and then it does it for you. Does the updating for their platform. And this was all done using this library called Go Update. That library is the one that Equinox.io uses. It's extremely simple. There are some security concerns with this. We want to make sure that we're giving users updates. So we don't even, you don't even have to do anything to verify the update. You can just install it, and you're like off to the races. But that's kind of not good because someone could tamper it, and then you've just basically compromised someone's machine. So right now, all we're doing is we're just including, it's like an MD5 or SHA-256 digest. We're including that there so that at least we can verify that the data hasn't changed in transit. And if we wanted to, I haven't gotten into signing yet, but we could also do signed binaries. So we sign all the binaries, we tell it where to go find the certificate, then you can just verify that it is actually Shopify who has released it so that it's trustworthy. If you want to do anything related to like client-side software, take a look at it. It's super awesome. All those things, the verifying integrity, verifying signatures is all built into it. You just have to, it's just a different command. You say verify this, that this has been signed by the appropriate person. And yeah, I was able to integrate this into ThemeKit in I don't know, an hour. It was really easy. Building all the other stuff, like building that the releases and all that took a bit more work. But this part was jokes. So let's just do a little bit of a recap. So if you're looking into doing something like this, or you're trying to add things to make your users happier, just try a bunch of different stuff. Maybe it won't work, but maybe you'll learn something that'll help you make a bit more informed decision on an alternative solution. Ask yourself what works best for your users. I don't know what to say to add to this. It's just ask yourself, it's maybe I am technically inclined and I know how to do this, but let's say I was just some random person who knew enough to do something and wanted to be able to knew how to knew how to program, but wasn't really good at something like the command line. And I know it's a command line tool and I want to move away from that, but it's what would work best for our users and try to move towards that. For now, for us, that is how can we get it to work on Windows. Try to reduce friction as much as possible, automated installations, making it possible for users, if they want to, they can go and build their own library on top of it, automated installation, all that kind of stuff. Automate away the bullshit. So anything where you're doing stuff manually. So a release before was I'd go and I have a make script that makes everything, and then I'd go to GitHub and type in, this is a new release, and this is what version it is, and then download this. So automating away that for both myself and for the user. Ooh, sorry about that. And then, yeah, just make sure that it's all that stuff is gone so that it's good for you and your users. Now, maybe some of you are thinking, this is all cool, but why don't you just use Git for Shopify and then all your problems are gone. You just upload via Git, right? So for the storefront, the active storefront is production. Git should totally be used there so that if a user pushes an update, because we've had this before, we've actually had this happen to some of our own stuff. People push an update and then something's wrong, and then the entire storefront's broken. So that's the storefront, the active production storefront should be in version control because that is where you want the protection of being able to easily roll back. On the other hand, development, you need to get stuff up there as quickly as possible, and developing stuff is broken all the time. So you need to get that quick feedback. And if you had to use Git to do your development, you would go crazy. It's like every time you want to like make an update to your program, you can't run anything locally. So you have to push everything via Git to Heroku to verify that your program's working correctly. So every time you make a little change, you push up, and like that's madness. So you don't want to do that. So we kind of need both. Yeah, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.